Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel for We Talk Mental Health. My name is Karen as always, and today we are going to talk about bipolar and related disorders. We're going to chat about some myths associated with the disorders. We are going to talk about the different diagnostic characteristics of each disorder underneath the umbrella within my best friend here, the DSM-5, and we're going to talk about some treatment options. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The first myth that I wanted to talk about with bipolar and related disorders is that bipolar disorders are rare. In reality, approximately 2.8% of the adults in the United States ages 18 and older have a diagnosis of a bipolar and related disorder. Out of those diagnosed with the disorders, approximately 2.9% are males and approximately 2.8% are females. In adolescents, ages 13 to 18, it's approximately 2.9% of the US population, and the diagnosis is higher in females at 3.3% and males at 2.6%. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the statistics in terms of the severity of those diagnosed, I will put the link in the description box for the National Institute of Mental Health where you can find this information. So the second myth that I wanted to talk about is that bipolar disorders are not just another name for mood swings. Mood episodes and mood swings are associated with bipolar disorder, and we do look for those as a symptom and as a sign that the disorder is there. But everybody has mood swings, everybody goes through periods where they're happy or they're sad, and it's when those changes in a person's mood start to greatly impact their functioning is when we would look at a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. The mood swings associated with the diagnosis are also more severe, they're longer lasting, and they significantly impact a person's functioning. So it's not just a mood swing, it's so much more than that, as with any diagnosis. Another myth is that mania means that a person is happy. So if a person is experiencing a manic episode, it does not mean that the person is happy. There are signs and symptoms of a manic episode that make a person irritable and edgy. And sometimes people are frightened when they go into a manic episode. But on the other end of that, I've also talked to quite a few people who actually like being in a manic state because they feel like they're more capable, they get more done. But manic episodes come with a lot of associated risks that we'll get into in just a second. So it's not just being happy. The other myth that I wanted to chat about quickly was that bipolar disorders can't be diagnosed until a person is 18 years old. And although it's harder to diagnose adolescents because kiddos have typical childhood behaviors that can make the signs and symptoms harder to recognize as a disorder versus a normal behavior, it's been reported that many adults who have a diagnosis of bipolar or related disorder have had symptoms prior to the age of 18. So it is quite possible. It's just a little bit harder to diagnose. There's fewer people who are diagnosed before the age of 18, and the median age for diagnosis is typically somewhere around 25. And again, you can find that information on NIMH, and I will link it in the description box. So a couple of things that I just wanted to talk about real quick before we get into the different diagnoses is that there are 4 different types of episodes associated with bipolar and related disorders. The first one is manic. The second one is hypomanic, major depressive episode, and an episode of mixed features. So a person can be in a manic state but also have signs of a major depressive episode. So we would consider that to be a mixed episode. And that's important to kind of know those different terms when we talk about the different characteristics of each diagnosis in a second. So a bipolar and related disorder is defined as a brain disorder that causes shifts in mood, in energy levels, and in a person's ability to function. And under the umbrella in the DSM-5, there are 3 major diagnoses that a person could potentially be diagnosed with if they have any of the signs and symptoms of a bipolar related disorder. Those 3 are bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and cyclothymic disorder. As always with any disorder, there are the diagnostic codes for medical substance abuse, other and unspecified, but for the purpose of the video, we will talk about the 3 main ones. So, bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, they have a lot of the same characteristics that we look for. There's just a few different areas that need to be considered when we're looking at which one is appropriate to give a person. So for a diagnosis of bipolar 1, a person has to meet all of the following criteria for a manic episode, and those are inflated self-esteem or thinking of grandiosity, decreased need for sleep, more talkative than normal, or pressure talk, the pressure to keep talking, distractibility, increased goal-directed activity, or psychomotor agitation, which is kind of the opposite. It's the sense of purposelessness or non-goal directed activity, excessive involvement in activities that have high potential for painful consequences, and sometimes an increased sex drive or hypersexuality is also kind of a sign and symptom of a manic or hypomanic episode. So the difference between a manic and a hypomanic episode is how long it lasts. So if a person has those symptoms for at least a week, it would be a manic episode. If a person has those symptoms for at least 4 days, then it would be a hypomanic episode. So in order for a person to have a diagnosis of bipolar 1, the person needs to enter a manic episode with all of those symptoms lasting at least a week or more. And it either needs to be preceded by or followed by an episode of hypomania or a major depressive episode. For a major depressive episode, a person has a depressed mood for more often than not, a diminished interest in or pleasure in all activities, weight loss or weight gain, fatigue or loss of interest, insomnia or hypersomnia, psychomotor agitation, feelings of worthlessness or feelings of inappropriate guilt, diminished ability to think or concentrate, and also an increased reoccurrent thoughts of death or suicidal ideation. The difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 is that in bipolar 2, a person never experiences a manic episode. It is characterized by a person meeting the following criteria for a current or past hypomania episode and the following criteria for a current or past major depressive episode, where the hypomanic or major depressive episode happens at least once and a person never enters or experiences a manic episode. So that's the big thing in how we kind of determine whether or not a person meets the criteria for bipolar 1 or bipolar 2. The third diagnosis that we're going to talk about today is cyclothymia, which is characterized by periods of hypomanic or major depressive symptoms that do not meet the criteria for hypomanic or major depressive episodes. So in adults, they have to be experiencing it for at least 2 years, and in adolescents, it has to be for at least 1 year. The person hasn't been without the symptoms for more than 2 months at a time, but they don't meet all of the criteria for bipolar 1 or bipolar 2 diagnosis. For treatment of bipolar and related disorders, medication can be hugely effective when combined with psychotherapy. And for meds, typically psychiatrists or doctors will prescribe mood stabilizers or atypical antipsychotics or antidepressants. And combined with cognitive behavioral therapy or family-focused therapy and psychoeducation, a person can easily manage their symptoms. Having a diagnosis of bipolar related disorder does not mean that the person is incapable of functioning or managing their, daily lives or their daily activities. It also doesn't mean that they're dangerous in any way. There are specific specifiers that we sometimes look for, whether or not the person has anxious features or they cycle a lot, which means that they're in and out of manic and hypomanic and major depressive episodes. And oftentimes, if a person is experiencing a manic episode, hospitalization can be really, really effective, because a person can become a danger to themselves or others, and they might not realize exactly what's going on. So, as always, we're here to promote the importance of education and the importance of treatment and the importance of accurately getting the information out there and the education out there so that people can learn a little bit more about mental illness and they can feel like they're not alone, and what they're going through isn't something that needs to necessarily last forever, and that it can be treated and it can be managed. And bipolar and related disorders are no different. So with that being said, I'm going to try and keep this super short this week because I sometimes ramble, and I wanted to make this one straight and to the point because sometimes it can get a little bit confusing between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. So I hope that I gave you enough information. I hope I didn't leave anybody more confused than they were before. I hope that you learned something. I love you all and I appreciate you watching, and I would really, really appreciate it if you subscribed to the channel, and if you also went and gave me and We Talk Mental Health a follow on Instagram and Twitter. All of that information will be linked in the description box below, and as always, I'm here if you have any questions, and I hope that you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.